Those two that had to be evacuated were here in Fulton County. This is the Fulton County election tabulation center. In effect, this is where all the votes will come in for Fulton County, Georgia's most populous county, where there are 750,000 likely voters on the rolls. I can also tell you that Fulton County has 177 precincts, and there is a cop on the beat of each and every last one of them, just in case. They want to make sure that these elections are safe, that there are no disruptions, and so far, Lindsay, so good.
All right, Mark Strassman in Union City, Georgia, for us this evening. Let's bring in Chris Van Cleve, who's joining us now from Phoenix. So, Chris, I saw somebody on Twitter this morning say it's crazy that people outside of the United States know about Maricopa County. But Maricopa County will once again be key in this election cycle. So the question is, of course, how long will it take for officials to tabulate those final results?
Well, Vlad, Maricopa County is a great place to live. I don't know why people wouldn't want to know about it, but it's going to take 10 to 13 days, the state says, before Arizona's vote counts will be finalized. And that's normal because so many people vote by mail here. And because of the verification process that goes along with those mail-in ballots, it takes extra time, particularly in close races. Even though if there's a big difference in one of the races, they may be able to call it sooner. We may be able to call it sooner, but it will take them up to 10 to 13 days, they think, to count all of the votes. We should tell you, we have just learned from the Secretary of State here about some bomb threats into a couple of polling places in Navajo County in the northern corner of Arizona. Also hearing about a handful of technical problems in Apache County, another small county in northern Arizona. So the bomb threats spread beyond just Georgia, certainly, into other battleground states.
Chris, what can you tell us about the Senate race there? We were speaking earlier with our political panel, and Chuck Rocha was saying that he believes that Arizona could end up being a split ticket state with people voting for Trump for president, but Ruben Gallego, a Democrat, for Senate by potentially large margins against Kari Lake.
Yeah, you know, the CBS News poll, the last battleground poll we had from Arizona had Gallego up by about 9 points over Lake. Now, both campaigns think the race is closer than that. Lake says she doesn't believe any of the polls but her internal polls, and those show her leading. But so far, those are the only polls we've seen that show her in the lead. So it is distinctly possible you're either going to see split tickets, or what we've heard from some Republicans is that they may just opt to leave the Senate line blank. So this is certainly a state where one of the things, if you look at the polling, Ruben Gallego is outperforming Kamala Harris here, and very well could result in a split ticket where Donald Trump could win the state, but Gallego wins the U.S. Senate seat that's being vacated by Kyrsten Sinema, who was a Democrat before she became an independent.
Some excellent reporting there from our Chris Van Cleve in Phoenix. And I agree with you, Chris. Maricopa County is absolutely lovely. It's just
I lived
weird.
There for
you did?
Decades, yeah,
really?
so I'm from there.
It's just weird that people in Denmark are asking me about it.
Yeah, Maricopa County, side of Arizona.
Oh, boy. Thanks, Chris.
All right, as we mentioned, exit polls are beginning to come in. So this will give us our first glimpse at the 2024 electorate. What are we learning about what voters most care about? What do we know so far?
All right, so we're going to start with issues that matter most to voters. This is really interesting. 35% of the people polled say the state of democracy is the most important issue. That's kind of surprising because I would have thought the economy would be number one, but the economy is followed there by a very close second. 31% say the economy. 14% say abortion is the most important issue facing them. Now, let's talk about the condition of the economy, how voters feel about that. 32% of voters say the condition of the economy is good. 67% say it is bad. If you are saying that, then you are most likely hearing the former president's message. In the last year, inflation has been at 21% of voters saying that they see inflation as a severe hardship. 53% say it's a moderate hardship, and 42% say no hardship at all. 24% of voters we polled say the financial situation is better than it was 4 years ago. That's interesting. 45% say it is worse than 4 years ago. 30% say it's just about the same. And finally, 7% of voters, only 7% of voters feel enthusiastic about the country. 19% say that they are satisfied. 43% of voters are dissatisfied. with the country, and 29% say that they are angry. So we're looking at those numbers, Ed. What strikes
These
you?
are the most preliminary bits of data we will get tonight. These will change. Nothing you see right now holds
Okay.
up even within an hour as we get more data. That number on anger,
doing-
43% or whatever, saying
Yeah.
that's, I would have thought that'd be higher.
That's
for
what I would have
example.
thought as well.
7% saying things are great. I can understand that, but I would have thought the other one would be higher. Look, what this is suggesting is the economy remains a top concern, but state of democracy was a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, which side was focused mostly on
That's
that?
the question I have.
Both were in different ways, right? Because Trump at various times has said, if we let them keep running the country, you know, we're never going to be the way we were. But the democracy, the specificity around the future of democracy was more of a democratic message. So that may, again, very
But again,
preliminary
those
data.
numbers could change.
They will change.
Okay,
They
they will
absolutely
change.
will change, but they are the first sampling. You know, it's
Yeah.
that, what's the amuse bouche they bring
Yeah,
out
amuse
to you?
bouche. It's
And
a
you had
little-
a
it's a
big
little
dinner.
taste.
This
It's a
is
little
your
taste
this
of
is
the
your
night to
election
come.
amuse bouche
That's right,
on,
that's
on
right.
a little spoon.
The
all right?
big entree is coming
Much
a couple
more to
hours
come.
later after the
Yes.
polls close. All
Kitchen
right,
stays
Ed.
open tonight.
All right, folks, when we come back, love it.
I'm starving.
We're going to get another look at our exit polling data for some of those key battlegrounds, and we're going to bring back our political panel right here at the table. Stick around.
I like one candidate, but I don't like his behavior, but I like his outcome. And that's important. And I look at it that way.
Get all the CBS News election information at your fingertips, including full access to interactive election maps, push alerts on major races, plus breaking news and 24/7 streaming coverage. Get the free CBS News app now.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal. That's right.
Let me see if you can find me.
I want to make sure that my voice is heard, but also that I lift up other voices.
You can't write a better script.
Yeah, boy.
It's gonna be a ride.
Counting down to the polls closing. I will also show you all the results in each state as they come in, as well as the battles for control of the House and the Senate, which is very important when it comes to power and who wields the power in this country. And we will bring you that all-important race to 270 college votes that Lewis was talking about, the number that Donald Trump or Kamala Harris need to reach it, to make it rather, to the White House. Plus, you can follow the results by scanning this QR code on your screen right now and by going to our special results page on our website and our app.
Well, we're live right across the country tonight. We're with the Harris and Trump camps, and we're in some of the key battleground states that will decide this election. As we've said, James Matthews will be with Team Trump in Florida. Martha Kellner is here in Washington, D.C. With the Kamala Harris team. Dominic Waghorn is in Pennsylvania, where, as Lewis was saying, there are 19 electoral votes up for grabs. Cordelia Lynch is in Georgia for us with 16 electoral votes. Michigan has 16 electoral votes, and our Yusra El-Bagir is there for us. And Shigi Marike is in Arizona, where there are 11 electoral college votes. Let's go straight to our James Matthews, who, as I said, is with Team Trump in Florida. And James, earlier in the day, we saw Donald Trump and the former First Lady. They were casting their vote. I've also just seen a little, he doesn't put anything out on, I guess he does now on X, but Truth Social as well. He put out a bit of a tweet.
Yeah, hi, Alda. He's been busy on social media, indeed, in the past few minutes, posting this. A lot of talk, Donald Trump, about massive cheating in Philadelphia. Law enforcement coming, he posts. Now, this is an individual who opponents say will try to style this election as corrupted should he lose it, and a man who has been laying the ground for a legal challenge. So I suppose the question is that statement feeding into that master plan? Will he come here, as he intends to, the convention center in West Palm Beach? He's not far from here. He's in Mar-a-Lago. He'll have his own personal watch party with the great and the good. He will come here at some point to give a speech. And this place is getting busy, Yalda. Dozens of media already gathering at the front of the stage in the mosh pit before the stage. What will Donald Trump say? That's the question. When he comes here, as he's expected to in the middle of the night, will he declare victory despite what's happening at the vote count centers? That's what he has done before in the past. So will we see a Donald Trump who is trying to shape this result his way, no matter what the figures are telling us over the course of the night?
And Martha, you're not too far away from where I am. I'm hearing mixed things from the Harris camp. They're telling me they're certainly feeling very anxious right now.
Yeah, anxious, but I'm also hearing cautiously optimistic. They think that Kamala Harris could well have outperformed the polling, may in fact be ahead of Donald Trump, but take that with a pinch of salt. I'm at Kamala Harris's campaign headquarters here at Howard University in Washington, D.C. It also happens to be one of America's largest historically black colleges. Kamala Harris graduated from here in 1986 with a politics and economics degree. Could she return to the stage behind me as America's first female president? That stage is still being built. Bulletproof glass is being installed around the speaker's lectern. As for Kamala Harris, after the madness of the 3 months that has gone before, the most truncated presidential campaign in history, she's having a quieter day today. She made a few appearances on radio stations, making last-minute appeals to voters. She's also performed a few vice presidential duties, and she made a surprise visit to Democratic Party campaign staff elsewhere in D.C. But as I say, her team are saying that they're cautiously optimistic, but I think they're aware, this country is aware, that there could well be a tense and long night and few days ahead.
Indeed. Let's go to our Cordelia Lynch now in Georgia. And Cordy, I mean, Georgia is one of the first states that we're going to be looking at because, of course, polls close in less than 2 hours.
That's right. And we've seen record-breaking early voter turnout in Georgia. More than 4 million people voting early, 700,000 today. And we are expecting 75% of the votes to be counted within 2 hours of the polls closing. We're told we could expect a result by midnight. Now, back in 2020, Joe Biden turned the state blue for the first time in nearly 30 years. If Kamala Harris wants to repeat that success, she needs to get a lot of support from black voters in Atlanta, where I am, but also in the more diverse, more affluent suburbs as well. But 2 words on everyone's lips here in Georgia: election integrity. We have already seen 5 non-credible bomb threats in Fulton County, where I am today alone. The FBI say they appear to emanate from Russia. The Secretary of State in Georgia says they will not be intimidated, but this is a hotly contested and very contentious race.
Let's bring in our Yusra El-Bagir, who joins me now from Michigan. And Yusra, Michigan, one of those crucial swing states for Kamala Harris, part of the blue wall, the Rust Belt. She really needs this state to deliver for her. But you've been there all week, speaking to uncommitted voters, speaking to some of her supporters, but also speaking to Donald Trump supporters.
Absolutely, Yalda. I mean, Michigan is a swing state, but it's also significant as a bellwether state, an indicator of who might be the next president of the United States. They voted for the winning presidential candidate over the last 4 elections, starting with Obama in 2008, and they broke their 30 years of voting for the Democratic presidential candidate by voting for Trump in 2016, and then Biden narrowly won it by 2.8% in 2020. So it's anyone's guess who will win here. I mean, we've been speaking to people across the state, and I could really feel why this is a bellwether state, why it's such an indicator of how this race could go, because there's just a cross-section of American society here. I mean, you've got a huge black population. You've got a huge immigrant population, Arab Americans discontented, infuriated by the Biden-Harris support for unwavering support for Israel during its military offensive in Gaza and now in Lebanon. You've got young working class people, working class families who've been reliant on the automobile industry, hoping that Trump can revive the economy. But you've also got students in campuses across Michigan who are backing Harris, who want to keep their rights intact and are fully supporting her in her presidential bid. So as the polls close, we're expecting them to close at 9 p.m. Eastern time, 1 a.m. UK. We'll start to see what the picture looks like in Michigan, and that could be a sign as to how the country will vote.
Well, let's go to Pennsylvania and speak to our Dominic Waghorn. And Dom, I mean, a treasure trove of electoral college votes. All eyes have been, for the past few months, on Pennsylvania. Both campaigns have saturated that state with so many ads.
They have, and we've had the candidates coming here again and again because Pennsylvania, quite simply and literally, could well be the king or queen maker swing state in this election, not just because it has that demographic mix that kind of reflects what is happening in other swing states, but also because it has those prize, as you say, 19 electoral college votes, and it is split down the middle. It was taken by Donald Trump in 2016 by a margin of less than 1%. Joe Biden took it back for the Democrats 4 years later by just over 1%, and it really is, according to opinion polls, split right down the middle. And it is inconceivable, all but impossible, for anyone to take the White House without taking Pennsylvania along the way, unless there is a major upset in this election. But the bad news for all of us is that it is also likely to be amongst the slowest to return a result because of the rules they have about counting mail-in ballots. They can't start doing so till the morning of the election, unlike some of the other swing states. So back in 2020, it took till Saturday before this state returned a result, declaring it for Joe Biden by that very, very narrow margin. And in those days, when Donald Trump saw the election slipping away from him, he used that vacuum to fill it with suspicion, scurrilous rumors of election fraud and frivolous lawsuits. And he seems to be beginning to do so again now already, even while the counting is underway. So it is very consequential, this stake. A lot is at stake here. They say they've raised their game here. They've bought buildings like this, a former Bible factory, filling it with hundreds of vote counters. But will that be enough to a return result tonight? Probably not. Could be days before we hear how this very important swing state has voted.
Yeah, very much so. Let's go to one of the Sunbelt states now and speak to our Shingi Mararike, who joins us from Arizona. So many issues on the ballot today, isn't there, Shingi? I mean, abortion rights, Senate seats, and of course, the keys to the White House.
That's right, Yalden. This is one of those reliably Republican states that Joe Biden was able to win last time, winning by just over 10,000 votes, a very narrow margin. And this is also a state with a diverse ethnic makeup, one that's becoming increasingly diverse, particularly when you look at Maricopa County, where we are, where Phoenix is. 1 in 4 voters are of Latin American origin. Whoever wins here will need to fold them into their coalition of voters in order to do that here. And I just want to talk a bit about where we are. So we're at a polling station here in Scottsdale, which is in Maricopa County, where 6 in 10 voters in Arizona are. And the queue here has been around 30 minutes long for much of the day. You can see people going in there. And as you mentioned, Jowda, the ballot is two-sided. It is 79 separate votes, including the presidential election, but also vital bellwether issues like abortion, like immigration, things that both candidates will want people to turn out and vote for them on. Kamala Harris scores well on abortion, while we know that Donald Trump scores well on immigration. But I also think, like Dominic Waghorn was saying there, this is one of those ground zeros for election concerns, because last time a number of armed protesters turned out outside of the tabulation center out after the vote. Arizona typically will return its vote between 10 and 13 days. That's when all the ballots will be counted. And a defining feature of this election is the fact that we have one candidate already calling the result into question before the votes are counted. This is one of those places where that could happen. All eyeballs will be on Arizona if this election is as close as we think it might be.
Shingi, thank you so much. So you can see there our correspondents right across the country, and they will be bringing us up to date throughout the night.
Yeah, and so what do we have for you over the next 12 hours. And, well, the first polls close at midnight UK time, 7 p.m. here on the East Coast of America. And just look at this. One of the first states to close, Georgia, is one of those battleground states that we've been talking about.
Yeah, we can see people queuing up to vote, and we have been seeing that right across the country. We've also got Sean Spicer, who was famously Donald Trump's first White House press secretary. He'll be with us in the early hours as the results come in.
And we'll be getting the reaction from the Harris and the Trump camps. Both campaign teams are gathering for what they call watch parties. Trump in Florida and Kamala Harris right here in Washington, D.C.
So as we've been saying, every state has its say, but some states have a bigger say than others. Here's a run through of what you need to watch out for tonight. Now, there are 7 battleground states this year, accounting for 93 electoral college votes. A reminder, 270 is that magic number. Whoever reaches 270 will be the next president of the United States. And polls put the gap between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in those states well within the margin of error. No one really knows which way they'll go. The first is Georgia, where polls close at midnight UK time. Joe Biden won the state by 13,000 votes in 2020. It just gives you a sense of how tight things were 4 years ago. Polls close in North Carolina at 12:30 UK time. Trump won there in 2020. And Pennsylvania, this is the most valuable of the battleground states, worth 19 electoral votes. And it's where many analysts believe this election will be won. Polls close there at 1 a.m. UK time. You heard there from our correspondent Dominic Waghorn, who talked about the importance of Pennsylvania. 2 a.m. UK time, polls close in Michigan. Along with Pennsylvania, it's picked the winner in the last 4 presidential elections. So too has Wisconsin, but by little more than 20,000 votes in the past 2 elections. And the third battleground where polls close at 2 a.m. is Arizona. The state went blue 4 years ago, the first time it's voted Democrat since Bill Clinton in 1996. And finally, Nevada, perhaps the epitome of the swing states, having voted Republican 6 times and Democrat 6 times in the last 12 elections. So 7 states, all with different demographics, issues, and priorities that are expected to decide this race.
Right, let's get into all this then with our guests, Jerry and Omarosa. So first of all, which states are you, or particular state are you looking at as the possible tipping point in all this?
Can I give just a little background? That shot that you see at Howard University, that is a significant landmark for those of us who graduated from Howard. That's called Founders Library, and it's a very special place for Vice President Kamala Harris. She spent a significant amount of time researching there and studying there, but the backdrop was hand-selected by her for this special evening. So I wanted to just give that context, because you're going to see that image throughout the night, and it is a significant part of African-American history as well.
I wonder if we can actually bring that shot back up just to show you, I mean, it's part of where the Kamala Harris camp is. And Omarosa, I mean, that is also close to your heart.
Yes, of course. Founders Library is where I spent tons and tons of hours studying for my master's and my doctorate. But I think it's also significant to recognize that there are tons of people who are there to support her, who are very excited. Friends are texting me from what we call the Quad. And the Quad is the place where Kamala Harris also became a member of the first female sorority called Alpha Kappa Alpha. And that is the place where she crossed into that organization. So a lot of importance for her and significance for Kamala Harris as we look at that shot at Howard University.
You've got some family members who are there at the moment.
Yes,
just tell us what they're telling you about the mood.
About it's like a dance party. They were dancing not only in the queue, but now that they are in the Quad, they are anticipating the results to come in. A lot of the feedback that I'm getting, people are very excited, but some of them are quite anxious, as you can imagine, because this moment is so significant to them.
Jerry, let's talk about Donald Trump for a moment. Well, no, I was asking you about the state. Which pivotal state? Let's do that first.
The key state, I think, is Pennsylvania. I was amused by Lewis's description, comparison of it to Swindon or to to Erie County as the Swindon. That could be a new slogan for Erie County. Visit Erie County, the Swindon of the United States, with a bigger lake. But I think Pennsylvania is key. Look, and it's key not only because it's the largest of those swing states, but there is this blue wall that people talk about. Not the blue wall that we had in the British election, of course, which crumbled pretty dramatically. The Democratic blue wall is really that old industrial North, those Great Lakes states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. She could lose every other swing state, all those other 4 swing states, the so-called Sun Belt swing states. As long as she takes those 3 northern states, she would win. She'd win by the narrowest possible margin.
And they tend to vote en bloc.
They have voted en bloc. They're together in every single election, I think, for at least the last 8 elections. But that is what. So, and Pennsylvania, we'll get a relatively early indication. The tricky thing with Pennsylvania, again, if it's close, they tend to count their votes more slowly than, say, Georgia or North Carolina.
Well, they don't start to count until the day of election.
They don't count exactly the early votes and the mail-in ballots until the day of election, whereas Georgia will have those results very early. No, I think Pennsylvania will be key. And if Pennsylvania is trending towards Harris, then, she can be pretty confident that she's going to win. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, then he's almost certainly got it because he's going to pick up some of those Sun Belt states, assuming it's close. I mean, if it's, as we said earlier, if it's going one way or the other, one candidate could win all the lot.
Yeah. Look, we've got an exit poll that is out. And now an exit poll in the UK is very different. An exit poll in the UK, they are basically asking who have you voted for, and that they allows the broadcasters to predict a winner. Exit polls here are very different in that they ask about all sorts of issues which have informed your decision to vote. So let's have a look. NBC, who we are affiliated with, have come out with a national exit poll. Which of these matters? And just look at that on the right there. The state of democracy above the economy is the most important issue. 35% state of the democracy, 31% the economy. So the economy clearly very important. And as you can see, 14% abortion, which may prove very important. 11% immigration. May be surprising that that's so low, but then foreign policy, I suppose, traditionally in an American election, not the...
The state of the democracy is...
What do you make of it? No, I was just going to ask what you make of that.
Well, Donald has spent so much time trying to dismantle the key elements of our democracy. So I understand why it's top of mind
we don't know
for a lot of the other voters. But now, even tonight,
yeah.
he's questioning the results of this election before the results even come out. That's a part of questioning free and fair elections.
Right, but don't forget that there are plenty of people on the Trump side who also feel like doc democracy is on the line. So that, what was it, 35% there?
Yeah.
That will include plenty of Trump supporters as well. But I'm really interested by that, because everywhere I've been, I've found that democracy has come below the economy, and that the number one thing people are worried about is their back pocket, and that democracy, maybe they're worried about it, but not nearly as worried about that. And then also the immigration, that's quite low there.
I'm surprised the immigration number is so low. Look, and Mark's exactly right. That could be both in polling that we've seen in the course of the campaign. A lot of Trump supporters say they cite the state of democracy because they think for things like freedom of speech that they're not allowed to have free speech and all that. So that kind of is ambiguous. It's pretty remarkable that immigration is so low, and actually, I think, was that right? I can put it up again, below abortion, right? Was it below abortion? That again doesn't fit with any of the polling we've seen in the campaign. People are asked, they say number 1 economy, number 2 immigration, and then number 3 democracy, and maybe 4
But the
abortion.
democracy
So,
thing,
maybe a different electorate.
is this reflective of the fact that many people are calling this the fear election, that there is it's the ultimate fear election?
But both sides have been campaigning on the idea of fear and change.
You're either a radical left lunatic or you're a fascist.
Well, not more than Donald Trump, whose whole campaign pitch has been, be afraid of the immigrants, be afraid of what happens if Kamala wins. She's going to bring these type of people into this country. He has stoked fear more than any side of this campaign. His campaign whether that's on Kamala's side, who's saying you should be afraid of another Trump presidency.
And she has said democracy is on the ballot.
She's also called her opponent. They've called their opponent fascists, and some of them have called them Hitler. I mean, you know,
well, his own running mate called him Hitler.
Yeah, but it's hard to argue that they have been the ones who've been sort of saying that they're a threat to
but when
the
your
Democrats
vice presidential nominee calls you that, I think that there is some credibility.
Well, he didn't call that.
To that point, in terms of how people view Donald Trump, because of course, when we talk about the undecided voters, people aren't undecided when it comes to Donald Trump. They've had a long time to have a sense of what they think of him. We're just going to show you this next poll, also from NBC, this idea of how people view Donald Trump, favorable or unfavorable. And as you can see there, 44%, 54%. Interestingly, when you do comparisons, between the different sort of demographics, if you compare white voters, I'm seeing here in 2020, 57% of white voters found Donald Trump favorable. In 2024, it's dropped down to 49%, which is quite interesting.
But how many of them will still vote for him? I say that because I think quite a lot will. So many people across this country will say, I don't like the guy. I don't like what he says. I don't like the way he acts, but I like his policies. So again, with that poll there, they may be answering, actually, I don't really like him, but his policies are good. And I really can't stand Kamala Harris because she's too far left. And I think, that's something we'll get into tonight.
But Donald Trump's always, even when he won in 2016, had a majority of people saying they had an unfavorable opinion. He's the first, two presidents, I think, in the last 50 years where that's been true. He's always, the majority of people don't like him. They may, as Mark says, they approve of the policies, some of the policies. They don't like the opposition, but they don't like, the majority of Americans don't actually like Donald Trump.
What is it about the phenomenon of Donald Trump then that appeals to people?
Because he's not a politician. That's at least how he pitched himself originally in his campaign. He said that he was going to come here in Washington and drain the swamp. They wanted to see a different type of change, and he had an opportunity because he positioned himself as this brilliant businessman who could take over the establishment here in Washington and bring change that people could feel.
But also, one guy was coming along, and he did in 2016, and that's why he won, who was agreeing with a proportion of people who felt they'd been screwed over by the elite. Their kids had been sent to war, their industries had been exported, their culture, their conservative culture was being mocked by so-called wokey liberals. And suddenly along came a guy who was telling them that he was going to screw the elite. He was going to do it his way, rip up the system and rebuild it. He didn't get the chance to do that in 2016.
But it's also that, but it's also, frankly, that his opponent in 2016, Trump was regarded unfavorably, but Hillary Clinton was regarded even more unfavorably. He lost to Joe Biden in 2020, in part because he was regarded unfavorably and Joe Biden was regarded favorably. We'll see tonight.
We'll talk about this later.
Tonight with Kamala Harris, I don't think that's true, Marissa, because
with
people
Hillary Clinton, you saw in the exit polling that a lot of those folks who voted for Donald Trump did not want to, nor were they prepared to vote for a woman to lead this country. Tonight we'll test that.
We'll have to,
She does much better on favorability ratings, Kamala does. And she has a higher favorability rating than Hillary Clinton.
Hillary
Clinton ever does.
Hillary
Clinton's campaign.
People just don't like her because she's a woman, isn't it? I mean, if she's got a more, if she's regarded more
I worked
favorably
for
than
the
Donald
Clintons.
Trump.
Don't forget that I worked for Bill Clinton and I worked in that White House. I know Hillary Clinton. She had a lot of things that she brought to the table that Kamala Harris just doesn't.
I mean, her campaign was not a great campaign.
No,
I mean, there's a lot going on. But look, we've just been hearing from both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris already today. Trump said he's feeling very confident about his chances, while Harris made one last call to voters to get out and cast their ballot.
How you doing? Have you voted already?
Give me a second.
You did? Thank you. You're ready. Have you voted yet? Thank you. Thank you so very much. And thank you for just being active and participating in this very, very important process. I'm looking at you and you're looking at me. Oh, there's a live camera somewhere. Which camera is, this is, okay, I'm waving it. This is waving it. Is this Teresa?
We have a great country, but we have a country that's in trouble. It's in big trouble in many ways, and we have to straighten it out. We have crime is through the roof. We have people pouring through our borders that are not exactly perfect. They come out of prisons. 13,000 people convicted of murder. We don't need this in our country. We have enough difficulty. We don't need that. So I think people saw that. And it just seems that the conservatives are voting very powerfully. No, I feel very confident. I have felt, we went in with a very big lead today. And it looks like Republicans have shown up in force. So we'll see how it turns out. But it seems that they have really shown up in force. I just got a call from Dan Patrick in Texas. He said they've never seen anything like it.
So you heard there from Donald Trump and Kamala Harris today. And of course, all eyes, as we've been saying, are on these key swing states, the Rust Belt states in the north of the country, and then, of course, the Sun Belt states. And throughout the night, we'll be seeing this map turn red and blue. And, there are some states, most states, where we know what the outcome will be. But of course, we are watching those crucial battleground states throughout the night. And Lewis will be bringing that to us as we move throughout the night and wait for the polls to close. Lewis, you won't just be looking at the states, but you'll be looking at these key counties as well and what they're actually doing.
I absolutely will, Yala. But first, before that, I think we should dwell a little bit more on the exit poll you've just been talking about from our colleagues at NBC, because it really, really is interesting. I mean, look at that. I don't think if we'd been starting that even half an hour ago, we would have necessarily expected that state of democracy would be ranked at the top for so many voters, 35%, next to the economy at 31%. Donald Trump's whole campaign has supposed to have been about making sure that the economy, was absolutely front and center. And immigration, which is only the top issue for 11%, was at the front and center of the campaign. And yet, according to this exit poll, and it will be updated throughout the night, at least, it hasn't been. Notable as well, abortion at 14%. And actually, if you dig into those figures as well, women are twice as likely as to rank abortion as the most important issue compared to men, 19% compared to 8%. So if it is the case that more women end up turning up to the polls, which there's been much speculation about, it could be good for Kamala Harris, but we'll keep an eye on that, obviously. But you're absolutely right. We're looking at the key counties in this election. Let me just talk you through a few of them. Well, God, I was just looking at it just now before you came over. So let's actually start with Michigan. And this is, let's have a look at it here. It's obviously a big, big important state. Let's update it here. This is Saginaw County in Michigan. This is the 2020 map. Saginaw County, really, really interesting place. Old home of General Motors. People talk about it as being a bit of a microcosm of the country overall. It's 68% white, 18% black, 9% Hispanic. And it's a real bellwether for the state of Michigan and for the Great Lakes in general. You can see here in 2020, Joe Biden took it by only 303 votes. Trump was just behind. If you go back to 2016, you see it's the other way around. Donald Trump bested Hillary Clinton by about 1,073. Obviously, it doesn't matter very much in terms of the overall numbers of electors in the state. They're in the millions, let alone the entire country. But it's a really good bellwether. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Let's have a look at a few other states as well. Let's go down to Florida, actually. Not a state that we're looking at as being especially competitive overall. If Kamala Harris is having a great night, it might be. Let's go back to 2020. But there's still, I mean, people will remember, of course, this used to be the swingiest of swing states back in 2000, obviously, the hanging chads, Al Gore, George Bush, and everything like that. But there are still counties that can give us glimpses of what is going on nationally. I'll be looking for Miami-Dade County. This is a county which has long been a Democratic stalwart in the state of Florida. But over time, it has been trending, like the whole state itself, to the Republican Party. Large number of Hispanic Latino voters in that county. Really interesting to see whether or not the Madison Square Garden's little imbroglio that there was with Donald Trump, with the comic obviously making that derogatory comment about Puerto Ricans, whether that has made much of an impact. That's one of the big things we'll be looking out for in terms of whether Kamala Harris can keep that together. We'll go over to Arizona. In the West, people might remember from 2020, this dragging on to Arizona's counting for days and days and days and days. And that's partly because voting in Maricopa County in Arizona is dominated by Maricopa County, which is the home of Phoenix. 60% of the entire state's population is in this county. You can see there, Joe Biden bested Donald Trump by a difference of 45,000 votes. That's how Democrats win in states like this. They pile and pile up votes in key big urban areas. And a really good example of that as well is down in Georgia, which is going to be, we're going to have these results in Georgia pretty quickly because as we were hearing before, the votes are counted pretty quickly down in the South. And I'll be keeping a very close eye on what goes on in all of these counties, clusters of counties here, which is around Atlanta and the Atlanta suburbs. Most of all, of course, Fulton County. Democrats dominate in these areas, big African-American populations and so on. But what Kamala Harris needs to do is absolutely run the table in these places, just like Joe Biden did. You run up massive margins in places like Cobb County, 56% of the vote, DeKalb County, 83% of the vote, and so on. And if you do that, then what you can do is just little by little outweigh Donald Trump's big margins in places like Toombs County, agricultural places where, as you can see, Donald Trump got 72% of the vote back in 2020.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more, Lewis, about turnout and what that all means for all of this. But for now, Mark, back to you.
Yalda, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in Pat Toomey, a former senator from Pennsylvania. Good evening, and very good to talk to you. I just wonder, first of all, how you think things look in this very close election.
Well, very close. It's a lot of questions, right? The polling is extremely close in all the swing states. But there's an open question as to whether the pollsters have correctly calibrated or recalibrated from the methodology that had them off in previous cycles, or did they over-calibrate? This is something we won't know until the votes are counted and we've got an outcome. But there are some actual data points that have been coming in. I find it interesting to see the big movement towards Republicans in terms of voter registrations. It's generally true across the country. It's particularly true in Pennsylvania, which is a very important state, as you know. It's also the case that in early voting, Republicans were almost entirely absent 4 years ago, but Republicans have done a lot of early voting and mail voting in Pennsylvania, in particular, this election cycle. So neither of those facts are dispositive regarding the outcome, but they are interesting data points that in some ways might be more telling than the polls.
Yeah, now I know Trump lost your support after January the 6th. Can you believe that he is so close to being elected again after what happened on January the 6th?
At times I do scratch my head about that, but honestly, I think he has a very badly flawed opponent in a variety of ways. And so I understand why people will make the decision that maybe they like the policies that former President Trump, when he was president, pursued, and they're concerned about the very far left orientation of Kamala Harris. So, look, in my view, neither one of them is qualified. Donald Trump disqualified himself by virtue of his behavior after losing the 2020 election, and Kamala Harris has been on the fringe of the political spectrum on the far left. So I'm kind of a man without a home at the presidential level, but fortunately, I've got lots of good Republicans I can support in the Senate and House races.
I'm tempted to ask who you did vote for.
I'll tell you who I voted for. I wrote in Nikki Haley. And, it's interesting. As you may know, during the Republican primary, by the time it got to Pennsylvania votes relatively late, most cycles. Nikki Haley had already withdrawn from the race. She had announced that she was no longer a candidate. And yet 15% of Republican voters voted for her anyway on that primary. So it'll be interesting to see whether there are more split ticket voting happening or not, but that's yet to be seen.
Senator, I just want to tell you about a post that Donald Trump put out on Truth Social in the last half an hour or so. He said that a lot of talk about massive cheating in Philadelphia. Do you think he's already starting to sow the seeds around this? I mean, he has been, frankly, for weeks.
Yeah. No, there's no question in my mind, if Donald Trump loses the election, he will deny having lost the election, just as he did last time, just as he did when he lost the Iowa primary to Ted Cruz, he will say that it was stolen, it was rigged. That is who he is. That is what he does. So I'm not surprised that he's kind of laying the groundwork for that just in case. That is consistent with his past behavior.
Okay, well, Senator, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Did you say he?
Thanks for having me.
Did you say Nikki Haley? He wrote in Nikki Haley.
He said he wrote in Nikki Haley. I mean, I guess, Mark, the big question is there are a lot of Nikki Haley Republicans, that's what we call them now, who are, being encouraged by the likes of Liz Cheney, Kamala Harris, the GOP to vote for Kamala Harris.
And where will they go? What did they do today? What have they done if they voted early? These are the questions we will find out the answers to.
Nikki Haley, moderate Republican.
Right, exactly. And of course, there are, in Arizona, for example, there are the so-called McCain Republicans, old school Republicans who really don't feel they've got anything in common with Donald Trump, do not want to vote for him, never Trumpers. But can they really vote for Kamala Harris, who, let's remember, not all that long ago when she was on the Hill here behind us, she was voted the most left-wing, the most liberal of all senators, judging by her voting record. So she's had a fascinating political journey where she's gone from being very left-wing. She's tacked much, much more to the centre. She's done a bit of running over the past few months to present herself as a more centrist candidate, to be able to try and bring in those people who might not be able to vote for Donald Trump, but would have loved it if Nikki Haley had been the candidate.
I'm really surprised that they did not utilize Nikki Haley, I'm speaking of the Trump campaign, a bit more, because she does have a big following. We saw that with the turnout for her, but they didn't in any way.
That was a mistake?
I believe it's a big mistake, because not only is he running against a strong woman, but he had this ability to utilize her as a surrogate, at least in some of these swing states, and he chose not to.
Why do you think that would be?
They couldn't agree between them. Trump didn't really want her. He just did, the fact that she opposed him in the primary was not something he was likely to forgive. He didn't really want her on board. She also, to be honest with you, was playing a kind of a very careful game. She finally wrote in the Wall Street Journal, an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal just yesterday, saying, I don't like Donald Trump, I don't like his personality, I don't like his character, but he'd be a better president on the policies than Kamala Harris. I vote for her. That was a really intriguing thing of her to do, because what she did is, if she had not come out publicly, I mean, she previously endorsed him, but the fact that she hadn't campaigned with him, the fact that she hadn't been seen with him, if he had then lost, her chances of, or even if he'd won, her chances of being the candidate in 2028 would be dramatically diminished. So she was kind of like making a little concession, a little down payment to the Trump supporters, the vast majority of Republicans who are Trump supporters, to sort of indicate that I'm kind of still on your side. So, you can't really accuse me of having sabotage.
All right, there we are. That's, that's the set. There it is. That's the White House. That's what it's all about. And that's what they're fighting over. We'll be back at the top of the hour.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation future. This is
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response? What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
Hunger, yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party? Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions. What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded 1-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here. We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way. We'll take you places. We teach you new things. And we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. You know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
CBS News, 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Let's get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go now. Yeah, boy.
Well, we got to start immediately. We can't wait any longer. It's not going to be possible.
In one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it? And we have the momentum because our campaign is tapping into the ambitions, the aspirations, and the dreams of the American people, because we are optimistic and excited about what we can do together.
American voters head to the polls as the 2024 presidential election kicks off with early voting, amid predictions of one of the closest races in recent history. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are neck and neck, with each campaign zeroing in on crucial swing states that could ultimately decide the outcome. As of the latest Atlas Intel poll, Trump is narrowly leading in all 7 key swing states, creating an intense, unpredictable battle for the Electoral College. The first results of the 2024 election day are from Dixville Notch, New Hampshire, with former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris splitting the tiny town's 6 votes. The final count read out by officials around 12:10 a.m. on November 5th morning were 3 for Trump and 3 for Harris. With tight races in so many states, media outlets may exercise caution in calling the election, potentially delaying projections. In the 2020 election, U.S. networks waited 4 days before declaring Joe Biden the winner, holding off until results in Pennsylvania became clear. In contrast, Trump's 2016 victory was declared within hours of polls closing. The dynamics this time suggest that election night might bring extended suspense once again. Now, let us talk about some early trends. According to recent polling, 49% of respondents plan to vote for Donald Trump in the upcoming presidential election, giving Republicans a 1.8% lead over Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. Trump has his widest lead in Arizona, where he holds 51.9% to Harris's 45.1%. Another survey of swing states indicates that Trump is favored to win across all key battlegrounds: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Experts predict that the election will hinge on results from these 7 swing states, where both Harris and Trump have strong chances. Voter sentiment remains volatile, sparking discussions around Harris's campaign strategy and her ability to connect with undecided voters. Early returns in these battlegrounds may offer limited insight into the final outcome, as vote counting processes in several key states could delay a clear result. Will Kamala Harris break barriers to become the first female president of the United States, or will Donald Trump make an unprecedented return to the White House despite his conviction?
As your president, I will fight for you every single day with every breath in my body. I will fight. I'll fight for that. Together we will save this country. We will defeat the corrupt system in Washington, and America's future will be an absolutely incredible one. That's what it is. Well, we got to start immediately. We can't wait any longer. It's not going to be possible.
In one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it? And we have the momentum because our campaign
did a slew of drive time radio interviews this morning across the battleground states. Other than that, I'm told that she has been spending time with family. That's a tradition for her to have dinner with her family members on election nights. She also made a quick visit to Democratic Party headquarters here in D.C. to thank the staffers, thank the volunteers there who have been behind her during this 108-day sprint to the finish line after
crucial swing states that could ultimately decide the outcome. As of the latest Atlas Intel poll, Trump is narrowly leading in all 7 key swing states, creating an intense, unpredictable battle for the Electoral College.
Back to you guys.
I'm sure it was an incredibly surreal moment. Nancy Cordes, thank you very much. Let's now go to Tony Dokoupil, who's joining us from Trump headquarters in West Palm Beach, Florida. Tony, my brother, you look rested for the very long night ahead. What's the mood like right now at Trump HQ?
Hey, Vlad, good evening. Well, they just cut the music and put the cable news shows back on. The feeling until that moment changed was kind of like a wedding reception here. The convention center is giant. It's beginning to fill up. The greatest hits are playing from your uncle's best wedding, maybe the second time around. There are about a dozen cash bars that are setting up, preparing to open. And there's a feeling of reunion, maybe a feeling of goodbye among the invited Trump guests. It's all invite only here, and many of them have already begun to gather at the foot of the podium there where they expect Donald Trump to speak later tonight in front of, and we counted, 43 American flags. Gone are the days when 1 or 2 would be enough. One way or another, as one supporter told me, this is a night that they anticipate will end in tears. They're hoping for victory, though, obviously. And just a short time ago, we talked to a senior Trump aide who said they like where they sit. They like their shoes. They are bullish on North Carolina. They are bullish on the senior vote. And they feel like the gender gap is more about Kamala Harris collapsing among men than Donald Trump collapsing among women. Of course, as Nancy touched on, one of the questions is whether we're going to have a rerun here of 2020, where Donald Trump comes out after talking as though victory were going to be inevitable and then accusing the American public and the 10,000 jurisdictions that run elections of a giant fraud, claiming victory while votes were still being counted. If that were to happen, all bets are off. But like I said at the top, and as a supporter put it to me, the one thing that's certain is in this room tonight, there will be tears by the end of the evening.
Tony Dokoupil, thank you so much. We have reporters on the ground covering election night all across the U.S., including the so-called blue wall states. So let's go to Pennsylvania and Michigan.
I'm Weijia Jiang in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the biggest city in the biggest battleground state where voters say they understand the assignment. They feel excited, they feel anxious, and anecdotally, election officials say it appears that they are ready to go because there's been a steady stream of voters here all day long, and it looks like the turnout will be high, which is, of course, is what both campaigns are really banking on. For the Harris campaign, they really need turnout in cities like Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania that typically overwhelmingly vote blue. And for Trump, he needs to have the rural area voters come out, especially because he has been targeting low propensity voters, those that don't usually vote, that don't usually engage in elections, to come out possibly for the first time for him this time around. And so it could all come down to this state that offers 19 electoral college votes. And while both teams, both sides say they could still win without Pennsylvania, it would be certainly much more difficult if they lose.
I'm Jerika Duncan here in Detroit, Michigan. We've been speaking with voters all day, many of them
describing the feeling of relief and excitement to finally be able to cast their ballot today. Here in Detroit, African Americans make up about 80% of the population. And while Harris is projected to win, she still has a number of other cities and counties to consider. Trump hoping to make gains on Black voters as well as union workers. Another voting bloc that is worth paying attention to is what happens with Arab American voters. Many of them have expressed that they are not happy with how the Biden-Harris administration has handled the war in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, tells me that based on the number of people who voted before these polls even opened, they are on track possibly to have a record-setting voter turnout this year.
All right, Weijia Jiang and Jerika Duncan, thank you both.
We're following breaking news out of Milwaukee.
Janet Shamlian is there. Janet, what are you hearing? What can you tell us?
Vlad and Lindsay, the city of Milwaukee has just restarted and announced a recount of more than 30,000 absentee ballots. It's happening as we speak over my shoulder. This is because 18 tabulation machines here in Central Count weren't properly sealed. They say there is no evidence that there was any damage to the ballots or the vote was at risk. And in fact, the machines were zeroed out under the observance of election observers here. But it is going to delay the results here in Milwaukee by several hours. They were originally saying 2 a.m., now perhaps as late or as early as 5 a.m. before we have a count here, at least in the Milwaukee area.
All right, Janet Shamlian, thank you for keeping us updated. We appreciate it. And when we come back, Vlad, we're going to be breaking down new exit polling data. More on who's voting and what they care about most. That's on the way. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News.
Get all the CBS News election information at your fingertips, including full access to interactive election maps, push alerts on major races, plus breaking news.
Breath in my body. I will fight. Out my body. Together we will save this country. We will defeat the corrupt system in Washington, and America's future will be an absolutely incredible one. That's what it is. Well, we got to start immediately. We can't wait any longer. It's not going to be possible.
I want to make sure that my voice is heard, but also lift up other voices.
You can't write a better script.
Yeah,
And we have the momentum because our campaign is tapping.
Impact on the presidency itself. Perhaps the most important of all is what is going on in the Senate, the upper house. So the Senate is elected in third every 6 years. There are 34 Senate seats up for grabs tonight. Each state sends 2 senators to the Senate. And as you can see, the ones in yellow here, those are the ones that are being contested tonight. And it's a bit unfortunate for the Democrats. The Democrats currently control the chamber of the Senate, but they only have a 2-seat majority. So the thing is if all the Republicans need to do is they need to flip 2 seats and they gain control. And unfortunately for the Democrats, when these seats were last contested 6 years ago, the Democrats had a bumper night. It was the midterm elections of 2018. It was in the middle of Donald Trump's first term. He was unpopular and there was a blue wave and they had loads and loads of seats, which means that they're on, as the Americans would say, defense. And it means that in particular, there is one seat, which is here, which is West Virginia. This has been long held by a man called Joe Manchin. He had held this seat for the Democrats in what had been a very long time, increasingly Republican state. The Republicans are almost certain to take this, which would mean the Senate would be 50-50 apiece. So they would only just need one pickup in order to take control of the Senate. Why does that matter? Well, of course, it matters. Let's imagine that Kamala Harris does become president. She needs to get all her cabinet appointees through. Those are approved by the Senate. And of course, if she wants to have any hope of having a domestic agenda, she needs to have legislation, pass it through the Senate as well. And there are other seats up for grabs as well tonight. Let's have a look at as well the House of Representatives. That's sort of the equivalent in a way of the House of Commons. There are 435 seats. Every single one is up for election every 2 years. Lucky voters in America get to vote for this every 2 years on a cycle. They will all be starting to color that map in tonight. And there's something else really interesting as well that will get less attention, but is really, really important. important, which is this. There are ballot measures going on throughout the United States tonight. These are special amendments, usually to state constitutions, and the most hotly watched and contested ones of all are with regards to abortion. Of course, since Roe v. Wade was overturned back in 2022, that is the constitutional right to an abortion, lots of states, including Florida, including Iowa, including Arizona, have reverted to an abortion ban or a near total abortion ban. Florida, for example, has a 6-week abortion ban, having previously had some of the most liberal abortion laws anywhere in the South. There is a ballot initiative on the ballot in Florida today that for a constitutional right to an abortion. There is a 60% necessary threshold in order to pass it, but the Democrats are hoping that in key places like Florida, and in particular in a state like Arizona, that could help drive turnout, drive women to the polls for the Kamala Harris coalition. So it all, in the end, relates back to the presidency, but there is a lot more than just the presidency at stake tonight, Yelda.
Lewis, thank you so much. And no doubt we will continue to hear from Lewis throughout the night as we start to get some of those results. Well, we're live right across the country tonight. We're with the Harris and Trump camps, and we're in some of the battleground states that will decide this election. James Matthews is in Florida with Team Trump, and our Martha Kellner is here in Washington with Kamala Harris. Dominic Waghorn is in Pennsylvania, where, as we've been saying, there are 19 electoral votes up for grabs. Cordelia Lynch is in Georgia with 16 electoral votes. Michigan has 16 electoral votes, and we've got Yusra Al-Bagir there. And Shingi Mararike is in Arizona, where there are 11 electoral college votes up for grabs. Let's go straight to James, who is in Florida for us. And James, as I was saying, you're with Team Trump. We saw Donald Trump and the former First Lady a little earlier. They were out, putting their vote through very close to where you are and where their home is.
Hi, Yalda. Yeah, Donald Trump out today voting. Amusingly said he wouldn't tell us who he had voted for. I thought, Yalda, there's been much commentary about Donald Trump tiring towards the end of the campaign. I wouldn't say I disagree with that. I thought he looked tired today. He is 78, of course, and has been hitting it hard through the swing states, 4 rally stops yesterday alone. But yeah, in the company of his wife, Melania, he said, he was asked, does he have any regrets about the way his campaign went? You always have regrets, he said, but couldn't think of any at the time. He said he would concede the election if it was free and fair, entirely in keeping with his narrative throughout, qualifying that by the statement that he's not saying it is going to be free and fair, or backing the notion of integrity. And let me tell you this, Yalda, in the past hour or so, he's been on Truth Social as he sits in Mar-a-Lago. Said this about 45 minutes ago. Lots of talk about massive cheating in Philadelphia, law enforcement coming. 15 minutes ago, he tweeted this: Philadelphia and Detroit, heavy law enforcement is there. Now, Philadelphia City Commissioner, he himself has posted on social media that there's absolutely no truth in that. But I do wonder, are we seeing Donald Trump writing a draft, his draft, of what he would see as the story of the night? Certainly if he loses. That plan to undermine the integrity, to question the authority of the electoral process and go to the courts and challenge it, and challenge an outcome that he doesn't like. Interestingly, in Mar-a-Lago, he's in the company of Nigel Farage, by the way. He's been tweeting from the back of a cab on his way to Trump's private residence, but also by Trump's side will be Elon Musk. And on this of all nights, when there will be uncertainty, questions as the results come in, he's in the company of an individual who, of course, controls X, and many people will be consuming their knowledge of the election and having their thoughts shaped about outcomes, about integrity by that very platform. So interesting in terms of the personnel and how it will play out overnight. Briefly, I'm in the convention center. We're quite close to Mar-a-Lago, a couple of miles down the road. This is a huge place, huge media presence. Trump supporters with their MAGA red hats starting to gather, several hundred of them. We expect to hear from Donald Trump at some point during the night on stage. So I suppose then we'll get a very clear sense of how he sees the shape of things. Remember when he did the same thing in 2020, he went on stage and said, I have won the election, declared victory, despite the fact that the results were still coming in. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely, James. How could we forget that moment? Thank you so much for bringing us up to date. And we will be talking to James throughout the evening. Let's go to our Martha Kellner now, who is here in Washington with Team Harris. Martha, just give a sense of what the mood is like there. I'm hearing that they're anxious, they're nervous, but they're also quite excited. And this is a huge day for both camps.
Yeah, Team Harris nervously looking at that exit poll data for any clues as to how this election is going to augur for her. I am at Howard University, not far from where you are, about 10 minutes drive from the White House. It's one of America's largest historically black colleges, and it's Kamala Harris's election night HQ. It's also her alma mater. She graduated from here in 1986 with a politics and economics degree, and her team hope that over the next few days she can stand on that stage, returning here as America's first female president. But just to give you a sense of the scale of the challenge for her in collecting enough votes to do that, I was here at Howard University last week speaking to students. You know, this is a centre for black excellence. It's somewhere where she should be able to rely on fairly steadfast support. But some of those students were saying they'd not been convinced. They'd not heard enough from her. She'd not made her case for being president forcefully enough to them. And they said they weren't sure which way they were going to vote or if they were going to vote at all. One student was also mentioning how close Kamala Harris is to President Biden and the Biden administration and their handling of the war in Gaza and President Biden's backing of Israel. They're upset with her for that. They weren't sure whether they could vote for her for that reason. I'm sure another thing that Team Harris will be looking at from that exit poll data is how big an issue abortion is for voters, particularly young voters. Harris has been courting the Gen Z vote in a major way over the past 3 months, and we know that younger voters are very motivated by the battle for reproductive rights. It's why we've seen Kamala Harris on stage over the past few weeks with women telling their own abortion stories. And these are not women who have elected to have abortions for financial reasons, for lifestyle reasons, or the myriad other reasons that women have abortion. These are women who have wanted pregnancies, who then experience serious medical problems, but are unable to get abortions in their home state, and then have these harrowing stories. I've heard them firsthand, where they've had to travel across state lines, sometimes hundreds of miles, to receive abortion care. The Harris team hope that those stories have resonated enough in swing states with those really crucial voters that it can help her get across the line.
Martha Kellner there. Well, we're joined now in the studio by Ambassador John Bolton, who was National Security Advisor in the Trump White House. We've got quite a gathering of former Trump employees, but good evening and thanks for being with us. I just wonder, first of all, did you ever think Trump would get this close to a second term?
I didn't. He shouldn't have, and I think it's a responsibility of the Republican Party and a lot of people in it who brought him back from the political dead. And if he's elected, it's another price we're going to pay for the damage he does to us in a second term.
Do you see more trouble if he loses or loses closely?
Look, I think his script is already written. I predict instead of waiting until 2 or 3 in the morning, he'll come on at 9 or 10 East Coast time tonight and say, the election's being stolen from us, just to lay the groundwork. He made a mistake by waiting too long in 2020. Just let's all get this straight. There are winners and losers in the world. Donald Trump is a winner, therefore he can't lose. Therefore, if he is losing, it was stolen. That's how it works.
Ambassador, your relationship and how volatile it has been with Donald Trump.
You're going to play the most recent quotes again, aren't you?
I am, actually. I'm going to ask you about, his recent tweet that he put out about you. And he was very, he insulted you. But one of the things he said was that you know, whenever he took you into a room, it would frighten the likes of Vladimir Putin. It would frighten Kim Jong-un because they thought that you were frankly going to attack them. And it worked for him. But he did say some nasty things about you. He also said that, you know, every time you'd see a $15 drone, you'd want to shoot it out of the sky and cause all sorts of wars.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'd like to find the guy who hired Bolton and get rid of him. You know, this is classic Donald Trump. It's a juvenile approach, and it's not just me. He does it to anybody who crosses him, and it's one of the reasons he's really not fit to be president. He doesn't understand issues, so he turns things into personal attacks. And in the kind of politics we have in the United States today, that kind of divisiveness is, I think, very harmful.
What about some of those issues? And he talks about Ukraine and sorting it out in 24 hours. And how does that actually happen in the real world?
Well, it won't. But I think it's a mark of how much trouble Ukraine is in if Trump wins. I think that his natural affinity for Putin, whom he thinks he has a good relationship with, will work against Ukraine. In fact, I think it's Putin who believes that Trump is an easy mark and is prepared to take advantage of him in Ukraine and in other cases as well.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, I was with Kevin Rudd last night, former Prime Minister of Australia, now the ambassador here for Australia. He said that China, and he has, you know, a working relationship with the Chinese, are more concerned about a second Trump presidency because, frankly, they can't deal with unpredictability, and they'd rather see a Harris in the White House.
I don't think that's right. I think Xi Jinping also thinks Trump is an easy mark. And my prediction is this: if Trump wins, the day after the election, Xi will call him up and he'll say, Donald, I'm so glad you won. That guy Biden messed everything up. We've now got so many problems. Let's you and I get together. We can fix them. Let's negotiate the biggest trade deal in history, which is what we were trying to do before. Trump will be on his way to China. I will tell you a quick story. When we were with Prime Minister May in 2018, she had us out to Checkers, and we had a conversation and a lunch with the president, his aides, and Prime Minister and her aides. And Trump was telling her about his trip to China in 2017. And he said, do you know the Chinese gave me the biggest welcome they have ever given anybody in all history?
And yet the Trump administration's policies on China were far tougher than the Obama administration's policies.
Over him kicking and screaming in many respects. He sees the relationship as fundamentally a trade relationship. And if he could get that biggest trade deal in history,
he's talking about massive tariffs on China.
Well, he believes that China cost him the election in 2020. Of course, he didn't lose the election, but if he had lost the election, it would have been because of the COVID virus coming out of China. And he thinks they're responsible for it. And that's one reason he's very tough. But I guarantee you the prospect of negotiating a huge deal, if Xi puts it on the table, will be irresistible.
Ambassador, I'm keen to know whether of America's other adversaries, who you think they would prefer to win. I mean, the Russians would prefer Trump to win, presumably because of what would happen in Ukraine?
Right. I think that's probably right. I think Iran has a somewhat different view of Trump.
Iran, I was going to come to. They would prefer Harris, given...
That's right. But I think the main effort by all of our adversaries, the interference they're currently undertaking in our election, while it may be designed to help particular candidates, is really designed to undermine Americans' faith in the legitimacy of our institutions, to reduce the credibility of the electoral process, to sow dissension. And you can do that very well by openly advocating somebody's election. It just irritates the other people. This is, I think, a very dangerous problem.
Ambassador, may I ask, Ambassador, is there anything you've seen at all in Kamala Harris's record, either in the Senate or as vice president, gives you any confidence whatsoever that she will be an effective foreign policy president?
No, look, when she became vice president, she had effectively no foreign policy experience. She's sat through nearly 4 years of National Security Council meetings, intelligence briefings. She's met with many foreign officials. There is no evidence, I guess this is in part a plus for the Biden administration because there are so few leaks, but no evidence she ever took a strong stand on any national security issue. She never carved out an area to make her own. She never seemed to have much interest in it. I mean, I think the best prediction you can make in the first, let's say, year of her term would be it'll look a lot like the Biden administration, but not because of her particular interest in any given area.
Ambassador, we're going to come back to you in a moment, but we've just got some developing breaking news in the last few minutes. Now, as you can see on the screen below us, that there is about 35 minutes left, or so we were told, that the polls in Georgia would close at 7 p.m. Here, Eastern Standard Time, which is 12 midnight in the UK. But we've got an update, and we're being told that the final polls in Georgia will now not close until 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time. So 10 polling stations have extended their hours due to the disruption from non-credible bomb threats, and therefore they have now extended the time for the polls to close until 7:45 p.m. So an extra 45 minutes. We have seen these threats throughout the day, haven't we, and heard about these potential threats.
We have, yeah. And I think it's the story we haven't yet discussed, the extent to which there could be threats and violence. And, let's hope not. But and I was actually struck by the fact that Donald Trump said in a bit that we didn't play, but that same clip that we played earlier on, he said that his supporters are not violent and that there would be no violence. Let's hope he's right on that. But clearly, in Washington, in every state around the country, there are people very anxious, law enforcement very anxious about how all this could play out.
But I'm really glad that they did extend the time and they did not disenfranchise voters who are really committed to making sure that their voice is heard through voting. So good on them in Georgia.
We've got a couple of more minutes with you. I just want to pick up on Iran and the question of Iran. What do you think Netanyahu will do? Wants to do, and what difference would a Trump government make to that, do you think?
Well, I can tell you what I think he ought to do, which is destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program. You may have heard earlier today he fired the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, and put in the former foreign minister to get a government that's ready to do that. I think the period between the election and our inauguration on January the 20th, transition period now really will be particularly interesting. I think a lot of foreign countries may try and test us during that period, but I think in the Middle East in particular, this may be an opportunity for Israel to take this action against Iran, which, by the way,
an opportunity because Trump would turn a blind eye to it.
Well, he's effectively said, I want this conflict over by January the 20th, which is he'd like to do that in Ukraine too. Not because he knows how he wants to end them or what his objectives are. He just wants them off the table.
It could be a much worse conflict by January the 20th.
Let me tell you, there will never be peace and security in the Middle East as long as Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons.
I mean, do you believe that period you talk about, that 76 days between when the president-elect is announced and inauguration, is a dangerous period because it's sort of a lame duck period for the U.S. president?
Yeah, look, there's only one president at a time. Americans are clear about that, but that's easier said than done particularly as we get close to January the 20th. I think there's also a risk, frankly, whether it's Trump or Harris who wins, that immediately after January 20th, they will try and test the new president. Whether it's Russia or China, Iran, North Korea, or others, I think that's going to be a dangerous period as well.
Can we ask who you voted for? I mean, you clearly couldn't have voted for didn't want to vote for either.
Certainly not. I wrote in Dick Cheney in 2020, but since he backed Kamala Harris this time, I had to find somebody else. So I decided today I wrote in Mike Pence because he's the one constitutional officer in the executive branch who did his duty on January the 6th.
Yeah. I wonder what he's thinking tonight.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he voted for Trump. I don't think he voted for Harris. Maybe I don't know what he did. Maybe he wrote my name in.
We've got a minute left. Just on a personal level, you joined Trump in, I think it was April 2018, I think, when I was here for a year. And I just wonder why you took the job. You must have known him.
Yes, I did.
So why did you take the job?
Look, I've been called a lot of things, rarely naive. I believed that, like every president before him, Trump would be disciplined by the gravity of his responsibilities in the national security space, by the importance of the decisions he had to make, and that, he would make the decisions, but we'd have a disciplined process and good policy. And I was wrong on that. Nothing disciplines Donald Trump.
I think one of your colleagues described him as fascist. Do you think he's fascist?
I wouldn't fight over that word. I think you have to have a philosophy to be a fascist, and he can't do philosophy. He can't do policy. It's all about Donald Trump. It's transactional, ad hoc, episodic. He's an aberration in American politics. 4 more years will be trouble for us.
Ambassador, if we do have a Trump 2.0, how do you view his foreign policy?
Well, I think it will be as erratic and unpredictable as in the first term. You know, he's made a lot of claims. Russia never would have invaded Ukraine if I were president. Iran wouldn't have attacked through its terrorist proxies. Those statements are not provable or disprovable. He just doesn't want to be Biden. And I think his real preoccupation would be domestic. I think he wants retribution against his enemies.
Do you?
And
you think that will happen?
Yeah, I absolutely think
And what form will that take?
Well, I think the main pressure points will be the Justice Department and the Defense Department. I think he's got a long list of people he wants to prosecute.
Including Biden's?
It could be. Look, this is everything to Trump is personal. And I think he's very serious when he says that he wants to use the Justice Department in the way he says it was used against him. I think erroneously, but that's how he sees it, and that's what he's going to do. He thinks he's been given leave by the conduct of prior administrations, starting with the Obama administration and the Russia collusion argument.
Can I just ask about the impact of his tariffs that you think will have in this country and abroad?
Well, if he gets what he says he wants, which is 10% or maybe it's 50% now, duties on all imports, it will crash the economy. There's no doubt about it. Whether he really has the authority to impose tariffs under existing legislation is open to question. It'll certainly be litigated, but Trump has a very simplistic view of international economics. Trade surpluses good, trade deficits bad, and he doesn't really understand why, but he thinks he understands it because it looks like dollars and cents.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Yeah, well, thank you indeed, because we're going to talk to Lewis Goodall at the screen, but appreciate your time this evening. And just a quick, which way do you think it'll go?
I don't have any idea, and honestly, I don't think anybody does at this point. We'll see the real results, and you know, hopefully it'll be wrapped up soon. I think one of them wins clearly. I hope that's the result, because if it does, it'll make the transition a lot easier.
Could be a Mike Pence majority.
I was going to say it won't be Mike Pence.
I don't see a
sudden late swing to Mike Pence.
I don't see a way of coming at this point.
Where is Mike Pence? Where is Mike Pence? We need to get him on. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And Lewis.
Yes, Mark, I thought it might be useful just to run through some of the terms and look at some of the states that we'll be talking about a lot tonight. We've talked already about the 7 key swing states which are going to dominate this election and dominate the coverage of this evening. You can see them there in grey there, as opposed to red or black. And indeed, we can see that, of course, these were pretty much the same states. Let's go back to 2020. These were pretty much the same states that were being heavily, heavily contested in the 2020 presidential election. So it's worth just reminding ourselves how Joe Biden did it. And indeed, Joe Biden took 6 of them. So if we think, we've got Georgia, North Carolina, Donald Trump had, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona. As you can see, Joe Biden got to 306 electoral college votes by winning 6 of those 7 swing states. And he came close-ish in North Carolina. And in particular, it's worth just talking about these terms because we're going to be using them as shorthand a lot this evening, which is this. We've got the Rust Belt states, or the Great Lakes states. These are these up here, the 3 here. We've got Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. These are real kind of solid rocks in the Democratic coalition. They have been held in every single presidential election by a Democrat, whether they won or whether they lost, since 1992, apart from in 2016, when Donald Trump took all 3, which is how he got to 306 electoral votes in that election himself. These are post-industrial or industrial states, a bit whiter than most of the rest of the United States, older, more non-college educated voters, exactly the sort of coalition that Donald Trump did very, very well in with 2016, and which Joe Biden was selected in 2020 to be the answer to Donald Trump, in order to be able to at least take some of them back and put them back together with the traditional Democratic coalitions of black voters, Hispanic voters, minority voters, and white non-college educated voters. So that is the Rust Belt, and they have, generally speaking, in recent election cycles, been trending towards the Republican Party, but still just about enough narrowly Democratic. Then, of course, we've got different states. We've got the Sun Belt. So this is Georgia, to some extent North Carolina here, and then you've got Arizona, and Nevada. These are states which are having big demographic changes, traditionally have tended towards the Republican Party, but particularly after COVID, and particularly generally, as I say, with demographic change, lots of universities expanding and all those sort of things, they are becoming more diverse over time and generally speaking, trending towards the Democratic Party. And increasingly, we can see with an exceptional ground game, particularly in states like Georgia, in Arizona, the Democrats, for the first time in 2020, managed to flip these states blue for the first time in a political generation. Joe Biden flipped Georgia for the first time a Democrat had carried that state since 1992. Before that, you have to go all the way back to 1976, Jimmy Carter winning it. And in Arizona as well, the first time a Democrat winning since Bill Clinton won it in 1996. If Kamala Harris, the route for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris is either through all of these, or ideally, as Joe Biden nearly did in 2020, in both. So we will be talking a lot about the Rust Belt. We'll be talking a lot about the Sun Belt, because those are the places where this election is going to be fought and lost.
Lewis, thank you so much. We just want to bring you all up to date because, of course, in about, I believe, 20 minutes' time or so, the first lot of polls were supposed to close, and we were really focused on that key battleground state, Georgia. But we have learned in the last half an hour or so that Georgia will now not close until 7:45. So they will keep some polls open for an extra 45 minutes. They're saying that 10 polling stations have extended their hours due to the disruption from non-credible bomb threats. Well, let's go straight to our correspondent, Cordelia Lynch, who joins us from Atlanta, Georgia. And Cordy, we were expecting those first polls, especially in Georgia. All eyes are on Georgia at the moment because it's that first battleground state.
Georgia, this is a key area for Kamala Harris to try and make gains with black voters. She also needs to make critical gains in the suburbs. We were expecting the polls to close, but there have been some delays. It follows non-credible bomb threats, 5 in fact, in this county alone earlier. We heard from the FBI that they believe that they are connected to Russia in some way. We've heard from the Secretary of State in Georgia, who has said that we will not be intimidated. But just in the last few minutes, we are also hearing some reports from DeKalb County as well that polling stations there have been delayed because of further bomb threats. We're awaiting detail on that. And I can speak now to two people at a watch party here, desperately awaiting these results, Nikidra and Shanika. Nikidra, what do you make of these reports, of these non-credible, and we don't know about the latest, but bomb threats? How concerned are you by those?
I think it's very concerning, and it's also sad, but I think the one thing that is, I think, going to pull us all together is the fact that we have somebody, Kamala Harris, who I actually voted for, someone who really cares about the people. And it's unfortunate that we're living in these times where they have to threaten our freedom. Like, the right to vote, it should never be threatened. And it's unfortunate, but I think that people are slowly but surely recognizing that this is a very important election, and to really vote your conscience and go with the person that you feel will lead and that you can tell your children about. And we already know who that is.
This was a very contentious state back in 2020. You'll remember Donald Trump famously calling the Secretary of State to find 11,700 more votes that would have plugged the deficit, if you like. It was a state that Joe Biden turned blue after nearly 30 years of being Republican. Do you think there is a chance that any result might in fact just be undermined, not accepted?
So based upon the history of Donald Trump, it wouldn't surprise me that he would try to contest the elections. But I think that people have wisened up, and they know that we're not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe anymore. And just to, give your good riddance and, accept the election results. We're tired. We are tired of all the back and forth with him, his rhetoric. It's just too much. And so in the event that it doesn't go the way that he likes, go back to West Palm Beach or wherever his mansion is and just live there. Like, we are tired of it. So move on. It's time to move on and move forward for that matter.
Shanika, I'm interested what you think about the black male vote. A lot has been said this year about Donald Trump chipping away at Kamala Harris's appeal on that front, that some just don't feel the enthusiasm for her, that they believe that Donald Trump is more capable on the economy. Is that something that you're hearing from friends, families, others in the community?
No, well, I'm active in my sorority, and there's also fraternities that are really backing Kamala Harris. So I did watch a couple of interviews on different media outlets, and I know one in particular said that they feel that that was a myth. And I feel really strongly about that. I really feel that there are a lot of African-American males, they can relate to Kamala Harris. I'm originally from the Bay Area, so I have a lot of similarities. We went to Howard University, same organization. So I just really feel that there are a lot of African-American males that are supporting her. And even when Biden actually endorsed her, African-American males, they got on for, their meeting and they raised money. So, I just really think that that's just, as he would say, fake news.
We know that there's been record early voter turnout in the state, more than 4 million people voting early. What do you think is motivating them? Because we have abortion certainly in the top of Kamala Harris's campaign, the economy big in people's minds too. Just shortly, what do you think's the most important to most people here?
Yeah, I would definitely say healthcare, like the abortions and things of that nature. And, I just really feel that people believe in her vision. When you hear from someone and you know what their platform is, and there's someone that's not really sharing what their platform is and just coming with negative, better, it's just, yeah.
Ladies, thank you very much for speaking with us. Well, we will update you as soon as we hear on those polling stations and when polls might close, but we are expecting at least some delays tonight with concern around the safety and integrity of the vote here in Georgia.
Cordy, thank you so much. So that was our Cordelia Lynch bringing us a bit of an update from Georgia. We also have a bit of developing news that's coming in from North Carolina. We're told that 2 precincts have extended the hours of voting because they're saying they have technical issues in Burke County in the western region and one in Wilson County in East Raleigh. So 2 precincts there have extended their time for voting as well. No doubt there are going to be technical issues as well as security issues across the country.
Yeah, and also news from Pennsylvania that election officials in Pennsylvania with both parties are denying Donald Trump's claims of massive cheating. Election board member there has said there's absolutely no truth to the allegation. It is yet another example of disinformation. So that's from Philadelphia, where Dominic Waghorn, our international affairs editor, is this evening. So, Dominic, what's going on there in relation to these claims of cheating?
Well, we're hearing from Philadelphia City Commissioners responding fairly quickly and pretty angrily, I think, to what Donald Trump has been putting on Truth Social. That's his social media platform at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, where he said, I think an hour or so ago, he said a lot of talk about massive cheating in capitals in Philadelphia, law enforcement coming. 3 exclamation marks. There has been no talk of massive cheating here in Philadelphia. There may have been a certain amount of talk, scurrilous it seems, within the Trump camp, but there hasn't been any talk of it here. So it took people here by surprise, except for the fact that we've seen this in the past from Donald Trump. And of course, Pennsylvania was the site and the location and the focus of a lot of Donald Trump's claims, scurrilous and false, they turned out, none of them standing up in court, of fraud in the election then, because there was a gap between election night and Saturday when a result was finally released by Philadelphia and Pennsylvania state officials from the election saying that Joe Biden had won by a very narrow margin. And in that gap, he was able to cast a lot of doubt on the process that, as I say, was eventually proven wrong and unfounded in the courts, but it did a lot of damage to US democracy. So we have heard from a number of commissioners, two of them, a Republican and Democrat, came out of the building here behind me. Now, this is an enormous warehouse, a big vote counting station. It was a Bible printing factory, but because of the problems Pennsylvania has had in the past, it's buying up these big facilities, drafting in hundreds of vote counters, and they've been busy all day counting, particularly the mail-in ballots, and now counting in in-person ballots. So from this building, we heard or two officials came out. Seth Bluestein was a Republican, and Omar Sabir was his Democrat counterpart. And this is what Omar Sabir had to say about what Donald Trump has been doing this evening.
We had a beautiful day, beautiful election. We're seeing high turnout from reports that I have. It's a beautiful day. And to be clear, Philadelphia elections are safe, simple, and secure, and they have always been. There is no cheating. There's no smoke to it. People say things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. We've learned this in 2020. We have hardworking people trying to give the citizens of America the election that they deserve.
Do you know any specifics of the allegation?
Hold on 1 second.
So as I said in my social media post, there is no truth to the allegation that there is massive cheating in Philadelphia. We have been in touch with the RNC and anybody who has any complaints throughout the day. We've been responsive. Everything has been handled appropriately. So we look forward to the continued voting until 8 p.m. when the polls close. We also have ballots that still need to be counted inside the warehouse.
What is your message to Mr. Trump? How concerning is it that one of the candidates says that you're cheating, put Philadelphia on blast on his Truth Social? What does that say?
Here's the reality. I mean, no one's worried, no one's concerned. We have hard-working Philadelphians who work on the election boards, who do the canvass. They're hard-working citizens. And again, that's an attack on the hard-working people who are honest. And we have evidence and proof to show that everything is on the up and up, and that it's always been. And again, we're not going to be here all the time just addressing whatever is on social media. We have an election that we have to run. So we actually ought to please respect that and let us finish our job.
What do you want to say to
So Seth Bluestein, the Republican official there on the right who spoke there, before that he tweeted this. He said there's absolutely no truth to this allegation. It is yet another example of disinformation. Voting in Philadelphia has been safe and secure. And then he said, we've been in regular contact with the RNC, that's the Republican Party and campaign. We've been responsive to every report of irregularities at the polls to ensure Philadelphians can vote safely and securely. And what they're saying is if there are claims, or if there is any evidence about cheating or fraud or abuses there, they need to know about it. They've received nothing to that effect. And so they are pushing back a lot faster than they did, I think it's fair to say, 4 years ago about the allegations made. But it's an extraordinary situation, Mark, isn't it, where one of the candidates in this election is, before the counting's even over, saying that there's massive cheating here with absolutely no foundation or substantiation for that claim. And one member from his own party and from the other party, from this very important part of this election, in what is one of the crucial, possibly arguably the most crucial swing state in this election, having to come out and effectively telling him not to do it. And there's nothing in what one of these presidential candidates is claiming about cheating in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, okay, Dominic, thank you very much. And Mark Stone is here, and I suppose not unexpected.
No, I mean, listening to Dom there and listening to those two city commissioners, I got a sense of deja vu, because this is exactly what happened 4 years ago in Philadelphia with city commissioners from both sides. And remember, these city commissioners are in charge of elections locally. They are the people that run the elections. And you had one there, a Republican, the other a Democrat, coming out on camera and saying there is no fraud. 4 years ago, it took a couple of days of barraging from Trump alleging fraud for the then city commissioner to come out, also a Republican, a guy called Al Schmidt, to come out and say, look, there is no fraud, and there is no fraud taken place. That was then proved in the court cases. Al Schmidt is now the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania, so he is the top man in charge of elections there. I've been in touch with him over the course of the past few weeks. Clearly, he and his staff have been very concerned about this happening. They have also been very prepared. I think 4 years ago, we were in the middle of COVID as well. They were not as prepared for what was going to hit them in terms of false allegations of fraud. This time, they are much more prepared.
All right, Mark, thanks very much indeed. Yalda.
Mark, and as you guys say, we will be following the situation in Pennsylvania very closely. But let's talk now about the economy, because as we've been saying, and all the polls have been showing, it's a big issue in this election. Americans are struggling thanks to inflation and high interest rates, and that could hurt Kamala Harris at the ballot box. She says she will cut taxes for more than 100 million middle-class Americans and provide assistance for first-time home buyers and new parents. Donald Trump has enjoyed a persistent lead in polling on the economy, and Joe Biden and now Kamala Harris. One of the core promises on his campaign website is to end inflation and make America affordable again. Well, let's go straight to our Shingi Maruike, who actually, no, I'm going to show you this exit poll now. And as we said, we are getting some of the exit polls that are coming in. Earlier, you saw that NBC exit poll, which actually put the economy just behind concerns around what the impact on democracy will be because of this election. So in that NBC poll, 31% of people said that they were worried about the economy. But the question here coming from the national exit poll was, who do you trust more on the economy? And 47% of people have said Kamala Harris, 51% have said Donald Trump. Well, let's go now to our Shingi Maruike, who joins us from Arizona. Shingi, we're getting some of these exit polls coming in. No surprises there that more people said that they trusted Donald Trump with the economy than they did with Kamala Harris, because, of course, they do associate the vice president with the Biden administration and its policies.
Yeah, that's right. That poll isn't surprising, just solidifying something that we've seen over the course of this campaign, the fact that Donald Trump scores highly on the economy. And we know that, speaking more broadly, in American elections, the economy is a major issue. You always think about that slogan associated with Bill Clinton's campaign in 1992, "It's the economy, stupid." And what we've been discussing with voters here in Arizona is why they think that Trump is the more capable candidate when it comes to the economy. And so much of it is more to do with optics than anything else. They see him as this former businessman who was in office before global conflict, was in office when inflation was lower, when the price of gas, the price of groceries was also lower. They take that context away and they speak more generally about the way Trump presents himself. In fact, I can remember quite vividly a couple of conversations with voters here. One person who said that I'm voting for Trump because my meal in McDonald's, the place I go as I think about having children and think about starting a family, will be cheaper. I know that sounds a bit oversimplified, but that is what they were saying. They said that that's a massive driver when they come out to vote. Other people we've spoken to here at this polling station have also said similar things, ignoring that global context as well. And I think Kamala Harris has put forward policies from helping people who want to buy homes to more social safety, social security as well. But that's not cutting through, because what you do get with Donald Trump's rhetoric is a kind of sense of bombastic sort of clarity in a lot of ways. So that, as I'm saying here in Arizona, isn't really making a dent. Just speaking a little bit more about what we're seeing behind me as well, you can see that people are still queuing up at this polling station. The queues have been 30 minutes over the course of the day. It's extremely busy. We know that there are 78 different contests on the ballot as well. And one of the central issues they'll be thinking about as they vote is the economy.
Shingi, thank you so much.
Well, in a little over 5 minutes, the first polls will close in this election. Hour by hour, we'll move across the country as voters have their say.
So here we go. This is what we have been waiting for. The countdown to polls closing, as you can see on your screen.
Just 10 hours to go,
of you and I up here with these guys. Georgia was due, as we said, to be the big prize. Polls now closing. No, I believe there's actually a bit of an update, Mark, on the situation.
Breaking news on Georgia.
That's right, on Georgia and North Carolina. A few minutes ago, we told you that the polls would be closing 45 minutes later than planned in Georgia, and there was a delay in North Carolina now. We're getting an update. NBC News, our sister channel, has confirmed that state polls in both those states will close as planned, with counting beginning and exit poll published, even though some precincts will remain open.
Yeah, I mean, because these were hoax threats, right? That's what we're talking about
and
here,
there
hoax
are a
threats.
couple of those locations.
Yeah.
One of them, one of my classmates is in, and that's the one that's in Stone Mountain, Georgia. That's staying open until 7:58.
Oh, is it?
Mount Perrin Church is staying open until 7:20. Kells High School in Cobb
But
County.
I think has that not been over? Where are we in this? Well, we'll find out. We'll find out from NBC because
And then
we're told
Golden
now it's
Isle
back to normal.
At 7:35, these are folks that are live. They're updating live
Right.
from these polling places. They're still in the line.
There are some that remain
Just those
open.
4 locations,
Right.
not statewide.
The challenges for law enforcement, for the FBI, are huge on a night like tonight because they're dealing with hoax bomb threats that could come from some kid ringing in and just trying to have mischief. Could come from Russia, as we've been hearing as well. And Russia has an interest in creating chaos in this election, of course. So they're dealing with all that, but they're also dealing with extremist groups as well. There's been some reporting in the last few days about a lot of chatter on Telegram, a messaging site that lots of extremists use. And the FBI, whether it be here, down the road in Washington at their headquarters or at field offices right across the country, they are working really hard at the moment to try and deal with all this. And of course, it's the same FBI that Donald Trump has discredited many times before.
And by the way, I should say, all this will
is
be
nothing-
grist for legal challenges. If this is a really, really close election and it's decided again by a few thousand votes in Georgia, North Carolina, or
Right.
Pennsylvania, and
Right.
Philadelphia, and polls were kept open in heavily Democratic areas, which these probably are, beyond the time that, I can see,
Yes.
election lawyers licking their lips
But
in
that's why they're
anticipation
targeting
about,
these
about
areas
challenging
to
it.
disenfranchise the poor, those who are not able to go earlier. They're going after they get off of work. They're targeting the areas where people have to stay in the line in order to vote. And if they're scared, they're going to go home. But some folks are staying around because they want to exercise that right.
Yeah, but hoax calls and bomb threats are nothing new. I mean, they're not exclusive to this election, and they won't be exclusive to this election.
Right.
What's not usual is that, a party leader talks about, a candidate talks about massive cheating
Yeah.
at this stage in the evening.
Yeah, I mean, as Mark was saying earlier, there is a sense of deja vu, isn't there, Mark? I mean, we've got about a minute 30, actually less than a minute now, just a minute 10, actually, until the first polls close. But Georgia, one of those key battleground states, as we said, some of those precincts have remained open, but polls will be closing in about 50 seconds in Georgia, alongside a number of other states, 6 states alongside Georgia, and there will be 60 electoral college votes that have been up for grabs. But it is Georgia that we will be watching very closely, because that is the battleground state that we're waiting to see what happens. Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia will also be closing in about 20 seconds.
There we go.
Yeah, 16 electoral college votes. It's such an important state, the heart of electoral fraud, so it was claimed. I mean, it's a big moment.
Yes.
And there we are. The polls have closed in, we're finding out the latest about Georgia, but they've closed in Indiana, in Kentucky, in South Carolina, in some very different states up in the north, in, Virginia and Vermont. But Georgia is the interesting one. We will be fixing on 16 electoral college votes. Biden won it marginally. I think 11,000 votes in 2020. It was the closest vote in that election. And polling suggests it will be close again, Mark.
It was there. It was where that famous phone call came from.
Yeah.
The 2nd of January 2021. Trump called Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia, the guy in charge of the election process there, and said, "Find me 11,780 votes." That, of course, the number he needed to win. And that then became the center of one of Donald Trump's court cases. So it's a key place. It's a place both sides want to win.
Right. We have our first result. And there it is. No great surprise. And a large margin of victory. But Donald Trump is projected winner of Kentucky. 8 electoral votes go to Donald Trump. Very red, as you can see. A Southern Democrat, Jimmy Carter, I think, was successful in '76. Clinton, maybe, I think I remember. But
it is a Republican state, as you say, so no surprises there. Donald Trump won it by 62%. But I think we can also show you Vermont. Vermont has just 3 electoral college votes. And again, no surprises. The projected winner, Kamala Harris there. Joe Biden won it by 66%.
yeah, and they're predicting that without even, look, I don't think they've counted any votes yet.
Well,
They've
yes,
predicted
because-
it's 3 electoral votes.
And that's because, you know, we know some things stay the same. It's
Well,
these
they have the
states.
exit poll. They have the exit poll data.
Yeah.
But there are some states in this country who haven't seen the candidates at all. They don't bother to even travel to these states because they know that they are not in it for one or other candidate. So there are large parts of this country which